We believe that life is better connected, and our aim is to help our young people find genuine friends and a supportive community. We also think that the best way to navigate this COVID season is by engaging together in smaller groups. We would love to help get them connected in this way by joining one of our Hangout groups. For any questions or further information, just email youth@forgechurch.com or check out the Forge website.
Hello and welcome to Motion Live. A special welcome to you guys if this is your first time. We have had so many new people connecting with us over these last few weeks, so just want to say thank you and welcome to you guys. There's still opportunity to get involved in Hangout groups. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on, but yeah, so glad that you guys are joining us here. We've had so many good things happen over these last few weeks and months, so you guys are a massive part of that. So I just want to say thank you for everybody who's involved in making this happen. It just wouldn't happen without you guys watching, so thank you so much. Now, today's Motion Live is a slight little bit different. Now, if you were here last week, I explained that over these next few months, just in a couple of times throughout these next few months, we're going to be looking at some really difficult subjects in a series what we're calling I Have Questions. Now, they're difficult conversations that you might have, difficult questions you might have, and we've got some really good sort of experts, I'm going to say, that are just kind of filling us a little bit more about their thoughts about these subjects. So let's go straight into it. Our first week is about coping and how we cope in difficult circumstances. Now, earlier this week, I interviewed some really cool experts in this. So let's take a look at this week's video. So, hello and welcome to our first Motion Live question and answer session, what we call it. It's called I Have Questions. So I thought what a great opportunity to start off with, just to ask you guys a couple of questions. So if you could just tell me your name, what you do for a job, and also if you scrunch or fold, that would be really good. So I'm going to start. Alice, go for you.
I hate that you asked that question. Anyway, my name's Alice. I've forgotten the second question. I was put off by the third.
Your occupation.
Okay, I'm a youth worker. I work at West Road Church and Wesley, and I do a bit of both actually. So I sometimes scrunch, sometimes fold. Depends what mood I'm in.
Wow. Okay, that's controversial.
Cool. My name's Johnny. I also work at the Forge, like Tim. Not like Alice, but like Tim. So yeah, have to see Tim a fair bit, which is really good for everybody. And depends on how much time I've got. If I'm in a rush, I fold. If I'm not, I scrunch, and then you can take the paper out and you can unfold it, and it makes lots of pretty patterns with the poo.
Oh.
That's the worst response.
Oh dear.
What I used to do as a kid. I don't do it anymore, but as a kid, that's what I used to do because it's like pretty origami.
Stop! Someone stop him.
Helen, what about you?
I'm Helen. Like Johnny and Tim, I work for the Forge part-time. My other job is that I'm a primary school teacher and always scrunch.
Always scrunch.
Wow.
Never had it down as a scruncher, if I'm honest.
Really?
It's the patterns, isn't it?
It
Finally,
will be tonight.
go on, let us know, Martin.
So yes, I'm Martin. I am a teacher. So I teach religious education at Debenham High School, and I've probably scrunched, to be honest. I've not really thought about it till now. So thanks for that. Nice on a Monday evening.
I'm shocked that there's so many scrunches in this world. I think it's wrong to scrunch, and yeah. Okay, let's get in. So today's topic or big subject is about coping. And we're kind of talking about how we kind of cope with different things that go on in our life. Maybe it's kind of major things that have gone wrong or in the past, or maybe if even it's just little things. So we're going to talk about how we kind of cope with those kind of things. I want to go straight into our first question. I'm going to start with Alice again. So Alice, what's the worst physical pain that you have ever experienced? What's the worst physical pain?
I think for me, it's just I got malaria when I was in Malawi, so that was really painful. When I first read it, I was like, oh, like a really bad cut or injury or like shark bite, but I've not had any of them. I've never broken a bone, but I don't
Alice,
know.
what hurts when you've got malaria? What hurts?
Yeah, can't be that bad. Alice?
All right, when you have malaria, it was like constant migraine, and I was staying in a little hut in Malawi. So it was like there was a chicken in the next room with a goat at night, and so like major headaches all the time, like migraine level. I was throwing up and needing the toilet a lot, and it was like a 200-meter walk across a field to the long drop that I had to go to, and I was there for like 3 days until I got picked up and taken back to our base camp. So I'd say that was pretty horrific. I ended up just being in the long drop with all the flies and all the gross stuff and feeling pretty gross. So
this conversation has talked about poo quite a lot, hasn't it, already? This is
sorry.
Yeah.
Well, it's the most pain I've ever been in, so sorry.
Johnny, how about you?
So it's a hard question because pain obviously sort of disappears like over time, and yet the memory of pain disappears over time. But I think whilst I can't really remember it, it must have been the worst. When I was probably 10 years old-ish, my younger brother had a wooden cricket bat, and he claims it was accidental, although I can't remember how it fully happened. I'll explain why, but also I can't quite work out how it was accidental. But he flung this cricket bat around and smashed my face with it and broke my nose, and the wooden cricket bat broke. He hit it with such force. So that's probably the worst pain that I've been in.
That is pretty severe. That sounds worse than malaria, but I'm not.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm not going to compare. How about you then, Helen?
Well, I've given birth twice. That's pretty painful, I can tell you. One time I had toothache for 2 weeks all over Christmas, and I remember crying quite a lot over Christmas. But hands down, the worst pain. I get really bad migraines. So I get what Alice was saying about malaria. They're under control now because I've got such amazing tablets that I take. But if I don't, then yeah, that is definitely the worst pain that I know.
I feel like we're getting progressively worse. So Martin, you've obviously got something that was really, really bad, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm now sat here thinking, I don't have a good story like that. So yeah, I was weighing up between so when I was in my early teens, I had ingrown toenails on my big toes, which are more painful than what they sound. And so you see what I mean? They're not as bad. It's not malaria, is it? And I haven't given birth. Yeah, no, I've not done that yet. Or I tore my ankle ligaments once playing football, and that does hurt. And yeah, I can remember hearing them kind of go when you did it. And then I drove home about 30 miles, which on, thinking with hindsight, not the wisest idea.
No.
But I'll go with that probably.
Nice. Okay, so we've talked about physical pain. What about emotional pain? What kind of emotional pain have you been through in your life? And maybe go on to talk about kind of your coping mechanisms, because that's what we're kind of talking about today. So what kind of emotional pain have you kind of experienced in your life, and how have you coped with it, Alice?
Yeah, for me, so again, it's a little bit like Johnny. Sometimes when you experience pain, it gets less over time. So it's quite hard for me to think of some things, but actually I've got two really big things from long time ago and then recent. So my mum passed away when I was 4. So you experience that pain very differently as you grow up, and then as you become an adult and you start, getting married and you do those things. So I think although I don't like cry lots, I don't get really emotional about it anymore. Actually, it's a pain that you learn to live with, isn't it? So there's that. And then again, I spoke to Sam before and I was like, what's the most emotional that you've ever seen me? And it was when my grandpa was having a heart attack in November. And it was just kind of, I read the text and it took me about 5 minutes to realize what it really meant. And my coping mechanism when my grandpa was poorly, we were just entering like day 1 of lockdown, and I was like, Sam was about to go to work and I was like, I can't be on my own, I don't know what to do. I ended up just running around the house grabbing items and being like, I must go somewhere. And I ended up going and spending the day with my brother, just because I couldn't comprehend sitting on my own in a flat for the day when my grandpa was having a heart attack. I just couldn't do it. And so I went there, and that was kind of part of my coping mechanism in terms of spending time with family and friends. So that was definitely that day. I think other coping mechanisms for me, again, I asked Sam and he was like, okay, well, healthy, when you get stressed, you do exercise, and it's a really healthy thing. Like, you don't overdo it, but it's a one way that I deal with stress, definitely. But the negative one is quite simply chocolate and bad food and baking. So the two coincide quite well together. But those would be the two of them. But I don't want to ramble on, but the other things that I will always end up going to is I always speak to my family about stuff. So like, I chat to my dad and my brother and my sister and my mum. They're always my go-tos. My husband as well is in that. The people that I trust and I love, I always end up speaking to people about that, just because I'm an external processor and I need people around me to kind of like push me forward, help me through. And then it tends to be that I do bounce back quite quickly with that, because I think because of the upbringing that I've had, it's just meant that it's a privilege, really. But anyway, yeah. So
cool.
I'll answer that later. Sorry, I've rambled.
That's cool. Thank you. Hey, Johnny, how about you?
Yeah, no, it's interesting hearing Alice like going through your different mechanisms and the rest of it, and hearing the things that I would relate to strongly, and then the other things that I just completely not feel or go through at all in terms of coping mechanism. I genuinely think the way in which people experience and cope with pain is far vaster than we could possibly recognize, and probably communicates a lot of who we are far more than we'd probably realize as well. And so when you were saying about not crying, Alice, like, I'm absolutely there with that. Like, could probably count on one hand the things that I've cried about as an adult, maybe if that kind of thing. So would just never, like, not even tear up. And so yeah, in terms of emotional pain, can think of definitely times, whether it's heartbreak or death, tend to be like the big, real sort of emotional ones, isn't it? So like, I can think back to when a close friend of mine died when I was probably 19, 20 years old. And it was actually a real prayer of mine, just sort of saying, God, it kind of feels like I really want to cry about this. And I kind of feel guilty for not crying about this. And I feel all the emotion and all of the pain, but for some reason it's just not. And it was like probably a few months of genuinely really praying for that. And actually, it did come. It was a real answer to prayer, and it was a moment where, really unexpected moment where it just came out like that. But that's a really rare thing for me to experience. For me, one of the things that Alice said that I really wouldn't relate to is going to family and speaking to people and speaking about it. I really don't like that feeling of, and I know it's very rarely this, but that sense of feeling pitied or looked after or wrapped around. For me, that just feels like, I don't know what it is. It's probably not very healthy, but that's just something, isn't that I relate to. My sister calls me Cactus Boy because I hate being hugged by my family. So yeah, I'd probably become far more reserved. I'd probably go into myself a lot more, which is something that ordinarily, when I'm not stressed, when I'm not going through that, I wouldn't be like that. And I'd probably become very overly optimistic. And so whenever I describe it, I'd always give a caveat that things are fine when things really aren't. Or I'd say, oh yeah, it's, it's not that bad, or I'll get over it, or things are worse for other people, or whatever it is. So I'd always put those different caveats in whenever explaining something that's not okay, because it kind of feels like it should be or have to be. So again, probably not overly healthy, but I think the more I think about that stuff for me, the more I recognize elements of who I am that perhaps I wouldn't ever really notice.
Oh, thank you. Helen, how about you?
Really interesting, isn't it? So yeah, listening to you two, like Johnny says, there's bits there that I completely resonate with both of you to an extent, or completely the opposite. So yeah, I guess emotional pain is when your heart's a bit broken, isn't it? And so for me, things that I would look back on that have been hard would be, my dad died very suddenly and unexpectedly. We waved him off to the south of France, which was quite normal for them. And then, yeah, he just died one night in their caravan. And so those phone calls to hear that that's what had happened, and I'd got young kids at the time, and so telling them that had happened when it was completely unexpected was really hard. So I think the emotional pain with that came with the degree of shock as well, because it was so unexpected. And it was just a dreadful year, because it was Sarah, Alice's mum, had died just 6 months before that, and she was a friend, and we'd got our kids at the same sort of time, so we shared a lot of experiences. And of course, she'd been really ill. She had cancer, and as a church, we'd prayed for her. So within that sadness was that, it just didn't all make sense as well. There were big questions around it. We had to really trust God in it, because it wasn't what we'd asked for. It wasn't what we'd prayed for. So that was sad, and yeah, difficult time. I divorced from my husband when my kids were quite young, and I think, whilst we got to the point where that was the right thing for me to do, I think it goes down as one of my saddest moments, telling my young children that we were separating, and them being so upset by that, and just knowing that then I was taking them into that future of their mum and dad not being together was just, painful and sad. So those things would really stick out in my mind. But I think, relationship breakup as well. So and I've had that relatively recently. And that's just, I don't think it makes any difference how old you are. It's just so painful and sad and hard. And so, those would be my things that I would recall at the moment. And how do I cope? Total opposite of Johnny, in that I completely wear my heart on my sleeve and I talk. And so, really wonderful for me to have people that are close to me, that I talk to, and I can kind of journey with. So if Alice does chocolate, I probably don't eat. If I'm having any kind of emotional crisis, I just don't eat. I just go off my food and don't particularly want to eat at all. And actually, so my most recent emotional pain has been like relationship breakup, and I have found the circumstances around it really confusing, and just confusing as to where God has been in all of that. So actually to pray, to be quite honest, at times has been quite tricky, and God has felt a bit absent. And so what I've had to do is just all the things that I know are good to do. So to pray and to read, and for me to talk, even though at times that hasn't really felt with my heart what I've wanted to do. I know that that's a good thing to do, to try to stay close to God in it all. So yeah, that would be another one of mine as well.
Martin, how about you?
Yeah, I was just thinking about how I did, like Helen starting to talk about leaning into God. I just think sometimes, what does that actually look like? So Helen's made it really clear, but for me, if I was to be said to lean into God as a way to cope, mine's probably through trusting what other people can say to me through when I do talk to them. So I would definitely be somebody so there's a fine limit between me. So when I'm dealing emotionally with something, I probably need some quiet alone time for a while. But then it's a really fine balance for me between when that ends and when I then need to talk to people, because I am an overthinker about everything. One of my biggest problems when myself and my weaknesses is I overthink, and so I blow things up, I exaggerate, I exacerbate things, and so I need to find that right time to talk to people, to download like how I'm feeling. So Sarah, my wife, would definitely be one, and she can normally pick up when I'm getting to that overthinking stage. And then other people would be my running mates group. So Tim is one of those, and Finn and Jez are mates as well, to just say, look, this is going on. Either what's your advice or thanks for listening. And it depends what the situation is. So I've gone in reverse with the questions, but I think probably my most emotionally challenging time was to do with my parents' divorce. Now, they got divorced, I think, when I was like 7, 8, 9, something like that. But I don't think I had to emotionally deal with it until I was about 18, 19, which was really strange. I remember it hitting me and thinking, what? This was like 10, 11 years ago. How has that now become a thing? And I was at university meeting new people and telling you life stories. And I was like, oh, so my story isn't normal, or, I know sadly it is quite normal now, but I began to realize I'd missed out on some of those things. Like they'd talk about doing things with their dads or whatever it might be, or as a whole family's like, oh, so that's what I haven't had. And so I then had to really try and deal with it then. And like, I remember some conversations with my parents, not together, but at different points, talking about it. And so I am definitely a talker as well about my things, but it's just, how do I stop myself from being in that overthinking state, which at 34, however old I am, I still haven't quite worked out.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate all your vulnerability and everything that you shared, because that's some people find it really, really hard to kind of share. So I really, really appreciate all of your input into that. And just kind of on the back of, I guess, that is, what is it through these experiences that you've been through? What is it that you've learned about yourself, about other people, about God? What is it you've taken from these experiences in your life? Alice, if you want to head off first.
Yeah, I think I spent some time thinking about this question because I thought it was a really good question. And I think for me, what I've learned about myself is kind of what I touched on earlier. I started answering and I was like, no, stop, I have to stop, that's for later. But it's that whole idea that I have grown up and I may have experienced pain and things like, but actually in amongst all the pain I experienced, I always felt loved and supported by a whole church. Like it wasn't just my family and my grandparents, it was everyone in the church were just loving. And I know that's a privilege. I know that not everyone experiences that. And I think for me, when I experience pain, I think or stress or things that kind of are difficult, I'm quite good at bouncing back. I'm quite resilient. And I'm not saying this to brag or anything like that, but because the problem that I find with that is sometimes I look at other people and I think, why are you reacting like this? why are you being like, just bounce back, you'll be fine, like talk to someone about it. And I've had to, I mean, I'm a youth worker, like I've learned that actually I have had such a privilege to grow up with family that love me, a support network that was as long as my arm. I don't know, what's the saying? There's a saying for that anyway. And I think for me, it's recognizing that we all experience pain differently. Like, it's that whole thing everyone's saying at the moment, we're all in the same storm, but we're in a different boat. About COVID, I've seen it so many times, but it is so true in that, you know, I've that's my experience of it. And it's what I'm learning about other people, is that actually not everyone's upbringing is so different, and that means that we relate differently to everyone, and pain and stress and the difficult things in life. So I think that for me, it's that I've got to, it's good that I can, and I want to keep that. I don't want to lose that. But it's recognizing that actually some people have not had it like that, and there's a reason why life is much more difficult, and things. Does that make sense?
That's really good. Thank you for sharing that. That's really good. Johnny, how about yourself?
Yeah, so it's kind of odd talking about, because the reality is I know that I've gone through far less pain than probably anyone on this call, particularly when it comes to emotional pain, but probably physical pain as well. But it's actually been something I've been really looking at for myself over the past probably few months, in terms of my personality and how I act, and why I am how I am, and that kind of thing. I think that's one of the areas of learning that I think everyone should do more of, learning about themselves, because if they know how they act and why they act, why they act how they act, then I think the whole world's better for it. But for me, one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, is that I'll look to avoid pain at all costs. And often that's not as obvious as it seems. So for example, people who know me will probably say I'm really prepared to have the difficult conversation. If there's really awkward conversations with different people, I'm actually normally really prepared to have it. But what often I'll do in that situation is I'll remove any sense of personal pastoralness from that conversation, so it doesn't hurt. So I can actually say what I want to say, and I kind of put that defense up to say, well, it kind of doesn't matter what they say, because I'm not going to feel it as a result. So that's probably one of them. I think I'm often, as I said, try and put those barriers up, and and those barriers often just look like optimism. I'll often just pretend things have to be okay. Things are going to be all right. Things will be okay. People will get through it, and the rest of it. So often that probably puts a presentation of something that perhaps isn't always there. And I think it is just because of that feeling of, if you say it enough, then it will be true, which isn't always the case. So I think that's probably something that I've just recognized within myself. I know as well as what my personality tends to push for is, in times where there is pain, always just look for more of something. Look for more of what is good. And actually, more of what is good isn't actually always good. So there are a whole bunch of good things that actually, when you take too much of, it's not always that good at all. So for me, I know that when I'm in points where I recognize things aren't all right and things aren't okay, or I've got to look out. Actually, one of the things that one of the ways, and actually I really press into God, which we've kind of touched on already, is actually really pushing into self-discipline, because I know that actually, if I'm doing those things right, if I'm eating right, if I'm sleeping right, if I'm drinking the right things, if I'm putting the right hours into the right kind of stuff, then actually that's really going to help me, rather than just go to the default of, I'll have more of this, more of this, more of this. I can honestly say that I've never been in a point in my life where any of those things have become too much, where drinks never become an issue, or food's never become, I don't think, too much of an issue, or whatever that looks like. But I know enough about myself to know that that could be something that if I wasn't as close to God as I was. So often someone says, oh, if you weren't a Christian, what would you be like? That would probably be one of the areas that would be quite different, I think.
Cool. That's cool. Thank you. Lots of wisdom in that. So I really appreciate that. Helen, how about you?
I think what I have learnt is that we don't always understand, and I think sometimes stuff is not revealed, and so I think we don't always get to understand what the pain has been about, and needing to come to a place at times where you accept that yeah, it's not all going to be revealed as to why or what. And sometimes you just have to sit with that, I think. But at other times, I think, yeah, you discover purpose in what has been your pain, or certainly that perhaps it gives you an empathy for others. I can remember when my marriage broke up, just thinking what possible good can come from this. And that's a long time ago now, and I've got some very good friends now, and our initial contact, our initial coming together was because of shared experience, and because of people linking us up, because we've been through divorce, and because I was further on as well, particularly one person who I'm running mates with, I'd been introduced to her as somebody that could just talk about my experience of divorce, because she desperately wanted to speak to somebody that was out the other side, as it were, and she was in the very raw stage of it. And so, yeah, to just be able to share with people, and that's kind of something I continue to do, is talking to somebody on Saturday, again, because she's going through it and it's all very new to her, and for me it's something that in a sense is kind of a bit resigned to history now, because it seems quite a long time ago.
Yeah, again, lots of good things in that, so thank you. Martin,
I think to kind of break it down a little bit for me, without sounding too much like a teacher, is that there's always something to learn from what's gone on, and it might be that's years later that you realize it. So I can look back, and this kind of harks back to something that Alice said about having the people around us. So I learned from my experiences of that emotional pain of my parents separating, just how amazing my family were with me back at that stage. So when I talked about the things I lost out on, I probably had a closer relationship with my grandparents than most people have, maybe even with their own parents. And I'm probably not great at showing my gratitude for that all the time, but I acknowledge that and recognize it. So that's one thing. And then thinking about, so with your own self-awareness of your pain, being able to kind of think about, even though Helen's right that everybody deals with it differently, to kind of think about, right, somebody acted like that, what's going on behind that, what's the cause of it? So when somebody behaves in a certain way, there might be some pain going on between those ears that you can't see, that you're not aware of. I am a way better educator, teacher, kind of the youth worker side of being a teacher than I would have been if I hadn't had the experiences I have. And I'm really open with that with my students. Like, if you talk to any students I teach, they'd probably be able to tell you that my parents were divorced. They'd be able to tell you like my fails as a parent and all that kind of thing, because I think from sharing that with others, then they can learn and maybe appreciate that, yes, they might be in a different boat, but the storm, I've been there as well. And to be able to share those experiences. I'm never sure where I stand on the everything happens for a reason thing, but I think you can find some learning from it. Because I think some things don't happen for a reason, but you can develop because of it. Yeah. But that's another conversation as well, I think.
I think that's really interesting what you were saying about being able to share with your students, Martin, because I said earlier that, like, I think one of my saddest things is that I had to tell my kids that we were separating, and I can remember my son crying, and like Johnny, he never cried, and begging us not to. It was just heart-wrenching. He's a teacher now, and he has told me of times where he has been able to get alongside, particularly boys who are going through difficult stuff with their family, and he's said to me, oh, it's going to make me emotional. He has said to me, I couldn't have done that if I hadn't had that experience that I've had growing up myself.
Yeah, I can remember one student in particular, not at my current school, previous school, and I just developed such a bond with him over the fact that he, lived with, it was actually just his dad, and I was teaching sociology at the stage, and it was all about statistics around single parent families and all that. And my bond with him was amazing because we ended up just laughing about it, saying, well, he bucked the trend. Like, he was such a able pupil, such a hard-working lad, so nice, and all the stats say that's not the case. And yeah, just the way we bonded over that, because I was willing to be vulnerable. So I think so there's some learning there as well. Like, if you're willing to be vulnerable, and if you find that a possibility, then that can help others, which I guess you were saying about your running mates as well, Helen, and we'll all have experienced that in some way through how we've shared with others.
And I think it really strengthens you. I think, isn't there one of those sayings like, show me a strong person and there's pain behind it? Or do you know what I mean? Something like that. I just think I look back on my life and, who knows? I'm sure it could have taken all sorts of different paths, but I've certainly done more things than I would have previously thought I'd got it in me to do, because I think, some of my life experiences have just made me strong.
I think though it's not that, yes, those experiences have made you strong, but actually it's letting God use those experiences, and that's what makes us strong. Because lots of people can go through lots of very painful things and always be sitting in that pain. But the reality is, if you ask God, and I'm not saying it's instant, I'm not saying it's straight away, or anything like that, but actually, if we do ask God to help us and to be with us and to help us learn and grow, that's when God uses our weaknesses, our pain, our difficulties, our horrible situations, and lifts us up to be strong. I don't think that happens on its own. It's God.
And I can remember coming to a point where I really understood this whole thing about God saying, but I am sufficient, I am all you need. And I'd spent many, many years as a Christian saying that, but not really knowing it and experiencing it and claiming it for my own. And I remember getting to that point of like, but actually, you are all I need. So if all this stuff goes wrong or is taken away, you are the rock that I stand on. And that, I think that's, again, that plays into those things that we talked about a little bit before, didn't it? About those disciplines of what's really good for us, and whether that be spiritual, but perhaps mental and physical and all those things as well. If you've got that really good, firm foundation, which us guys would believe is in God as well, you're on something strong when that pain comes.
Definitely. That's so good. Like, this has been amazing for me personally, but also I'm sure it has for all the young people that are going to be watching this during Motion. So I really appreciate your guys' time. I think, a lot of people in these times when they're going through pain, they always ask that question. I think Alice mentioned it earlier on about, where is God in this? How is God? Why is God allowing this to happen? I think you guys have given them some really kind of clear kind of ways to answer that. God is in your relationships with your family. God is in the way that he's growing you through these experiences, and in so many ways we can see God when we're going through this pain. So, and you guys have made that really clear. So I want to thank you on behalf of everybody that's going to be watching this. Thank you for your vulnerability, thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for your time. So thank you very much, guys,
for having us.
You're welcome.
Great therapy session.
That was so good, full of lots of wisdom and full of lots of insight, and it was just really good. I really enjoyed recording it with those guys, but I really enjoyed watching it back just then too. And I hope you guys found it useful, but also found it enjoyable and got something from it. So just want to thank those guys again for their input. Now it's time for you guys to extend your conversations or thoughts about it into your Hangout groups. So Hangout groups, for those guys that are here for the first time, if you head over to our Instagram page. There's a link in our bio where you can find out more information about the Hangout groups. If you're still a little bit nervous, don't want to get involved just yet, maybe just drop me an email, youth@forgechurch.com. I'd love to give you more information about those Hangout groups. So now's your time to go into your Hangout groups. I'll see you all next week where we start a brand new series. So let's take a look at our new series. See you next week.